I'm Elizabeth Partridge. I've written Marching for Freedom, Walk Together Children, and Don't You Get Weary. It's the story of the march from Selma to Montgomery in 1965 for the vote. It was led by Martin Luther King, and there's a number of fantastic civil rights people who were involved in the march. But as I began looking at the photographs, I kept seeing pictures of teens and children. And I began thinking, where did all these kids come from? What are they doing here? What's their part of this march? So while at first I did all this research in the library and I read all these books, checked out books, bought books, got a hold of everything I could. And I liked the story of how a group of people can come together and make an enormous change. With the number of children in there, I started to think, how important were these kids to the march? And what I found out is they were instrumental in the success of the march happening, and I believe in getting the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed. I ran across these photos online by a guy named Matt Herron, who was one of the civil rights photographers. For a couple of years, he was extremely active, doing beautiful black and white photography of all kinds of parts of the civil rights march. I ran into his photos online and I was like, oh, I want to do a book on this. I could use these beautiful photos. And a lot of his photos, there was a few iconic photos that are fairly well known, but the vast majority of his photographs have never really been put together in a book. So I started at that point, and then I started looking for other photographers. And I found a couple of other people who did just amazing, amazing photographs. And then newspaper photographers, magazine photographers, because a lot of the ways the information got out at that time was through still photographs that were carried in the media. King couldn't have pulled off this march without those photographers spreading the word across the country and shifting public opinion. But it's when I began interviewing the kids. What I did is I went to Selma, Alabama. It was actually November 4th. So we were all voting for whether or not we wanted Obama for president. And I had just happened to arrange to be there that day without even thinking about it. Voted ahead of time, flew down to Selma, and I began interviewing these adults who had been kids in the march. And that's when I felt the book come alive. That's when, once I had their stories, these beautiful stories of courage and bravery, where they didn't even particularly think they were being that brave and courageous. They were just getting up every morning, putting on their shoes, and doing it again. And I was awed by these kids. And I thought, I don't think I would have had the courage that these guys had. And what gave them that courage? What is it in each one of these people that I interviewed that allowed them to be so brave? Where did they find that strength? So that's when the book started to just snap for me. It's kind of like two primary sources, the photographs and the stories. And then I knew I had it. I knew I had this just beautiful story. It was amazing to be there November 4th. That I went to a meeting in the church where people talked about what it had been like many years earlier when they were all participating in the march. And then there was a candlelight vigil over the Pettus Bridge, which is where the march, first the marchers were turned at the bottom of the bridge. They were severely beaten up and run all the way back into Selma, all the way back to the Carver home, back into the churches. Then on the actual march, they victoriously crossed the Pettus Bridge. So on this candlelight vigil, we walked across the bridge, and it was so quiet. We all held candles, and really all you could hear was people. And so we walked across the bridge, and then we gathered at the bottom where Amelia Boynton had been severely beaten up by the troopers. And she's a very old woman now, 97, 98, and she was helped into the center of this area we were all standing, and she began talking, and we came closer, and all the candles were lighting everybody's faces, they were all holding their candles. I was so awed how beautiful it was. And then all of a sudden, somebody yelled out, "Obama's taken Pennsylvania!" the crowd erupted. It just went from quiet to wow! Everybody was so thrilled because everyone knew that once he took Pennsylvania, he was going to do that. It was quite a moment. It was wonderful. And later, one of the women I interviewed, Linda Lowry, said to me, Obama is going to the presidency on our shoulders. And I just thought that was so beautiful that she understood that each little piece of what they had all done led to that moment. And, you know, she was pleased and proud. And absolutely should be.